as the hearse bore their hero past West Bromwich Albion's stadium, fans raised one last chant for Cyrille Regis.
We played at a time when black players had to endure much vile racist abuse, yet Cyrille never lost his cool. We will forever keep you in our thoughts, our prayers and our hearts, for we will never forget Cyrille.
They defended me. 6 players stood between Cyrille Regis and the worst racism English football has ever seen. This is the story of the men who protected a legend during the most hostile period in the sport's history. Who were they, and how did they shield him from the hate that poured from the stands? Let's go back to the late 1970s and discover the brotherhood that changed football forever. Picture England in 1978. The country was falling apart. Strikes crippled the nation. The National Front marched openly in the streets, and football stadiums became battlegrounds where racism wasn't just accepted, it was normal. When Cyrille Regis stepped onto English pitches, he walked into a nightmare. Bananas flew through the air, aimed at his head. Thousands of voices chanted monkey noises that echoed around concrete terraces. The abuse wasn't occasional, it happened every single week. But the worst moment came when Regis received a package in the post. Inside was a silver bullet. A note made from cut-out newspaper letters warned him, "You'll get one of these through your knees if you step out on Wembley turf." Someone wanted to shoot him simply for being selected to play for England. Most clubs left their black players to fight alone. Managers ignored the abuse. Teammates looked away. The authorities did nothing. As Brendan Batson later said, football during the 1970s and 1980s was lying face down in the gutter. West Bromwich Albion was different. Something special was happening at the Hawthorns. Regis wasn't saved by the football authorities or the police. He was saved by his teammates. 6 men who formed a protective wall around him and refused to let the racists win. Laurie Cunningham was more than a teammate to Cyrille Regis. He was his closest friend on and off the pitch. When the abuse rained down from the stands, it was split between them. When one suffered, the other felt the pain. Cunningham had a gift. He could dance through defences like they weren't there. His response to racism was pure artistry. When the boos started, he played better. He made the racists look foolish by being brilliant. The documentary about this era noted that Cunningham shrugged off pathetic racist boos with a performance that oozed class, grace and pace. He became the best player in Europe for a season. That level of excellence proved that black players weren't just equal, they were better. When Real Madrid came calling in 1979, Cunningham broke barriers that opened doors for Regis and countless others. His move to Spain showed the world that English racism couldn't contain true talent. Tragically, Cunningham died in a car accident in 1989. Regis was devastated. The loss led to a spiritual awakening that defined the rest of his life. But during those golden years at West Brom, Cunningham saved Regis by shouldering half the burden and showing that brilliance was the best revenge. Brendan Batson completed the famous trio called the 3 Degrees. He was the thinker, the organiser, the one who understood that this fight was bigger than football. As a defender, Batson played alongside the white allies, Weil, Robertson and Statham. He integrated the 3 Degrees into the defensive structure of the team. He was the bridge between the black pioneers and their white protectors. Batson saved Regis through mentorship and solidarity. When bananas were thrown at Regis, Batson felt it personally. He knew Regis as a very kind person, and it was impossible not to feel hurt and fearful when his friend was attacked. But Batson didn't just feel the pain, he channeled it into action. He later became a key figure in the Professional Footballers Association and helped found Kick It Out, the anti-racism campaign. Batson ensured that the anger was directed into constructive change, so Regis didn't have to fight alone as an individual. John Weil was the club captain, a central defender from the old school, hard as nails and utterly fearless. His role in saving Regis had 2 parts. First, physical protection. In the 1970s, defenders could get away with brutal tackles that would cause red cards today. Opposition players often targeted Regis with violent challenges designed to break his spirit. Weil made sure that anyone who kicked Regis had to answer to him. He policed the pitch. If you hurt his teammate, you'd pay the price. Second, Weil saved Regis through normalisation. When the famous Blacks versus Whites testimonial match was organised in 1979, Weil's attitude was revealing. He said it was just another game. While this might seem dismissive, it was actually radical. Weil didn't view his black teammates as political symbols or exotic additions. He saw them as essential parts of his team. By refusing to treat them differently, he denied the racists the division they craved. For Weil, they were just his mates, wearing the same shirt. Ali Robertson was the Scottish centre-back who formed a legendary partnership with Weil. He played over 500 games for West Brom and was a fixture throughout the 3 Degrees era. Robertson was the bodyguard. He did the dirty work so the flair players could shine. He has spoken fondly about the team, noting that the 3 Degrees were oozing class. His job was simple: make sure nobody could bully West Brom. Racist abuse often relies on the perception of weakness. With Robertson and Weil at the back, West Brom projected nothing but strength. They provided a defensive platform, a clean sheet mentality that allowed Cunningham's skill and Regis's power to win matches. Robertson's constant presence in the lineup meant Regis knew he was protected every single week. That security was priceless. It meant Regis could focus on scoring goals instead of watching his back. Len Cantello was the midfielder who linked everything together, but his importance in saving Regis goes far beyond his work rate on the pitch. In 1979, it was Cantello's testimonial that featured the famous Blacks versus Whites match. This was a white player agreeing to let his benefit match, usually a quiet, easy payday, become a stage for a racial statement. That took trust and courage. Regis captained the black team. For the black players, this wasn't just entertainment. It was a crusade. They felt they had to win to prove that black players had discipline and organisation. The fact that Cantello allowed this, and that he and his white teammates accepted defeat without bitterness when the Blacks won 3-2, showed the lack of racial tension within the squad. The testimonial match revealed something remarkable about the West Brom dressing room. While thousands of fans packed the stadium to watch this unusual spectacle, the players themselves treated it with a mixture of seriousness and joy. The white players understood what was at stake for their black teammates. They played hard but fair, never resorting to the brutal tactics that opposition teams used against Regis week after week. There was even a 4th player involved that day, Vernon Hodgson. A young trialist at the time, Hodgson was drafted into the black team to make up the numbers. The documentary maker Adrian Chiles later called him the 4th Degree, but Hodgson never made it as a professional. He spent 30 years working as a refuse collector in West Bromwich. Hodgson's story provides a stark reminder of how fragile success was for black players in that era. Without the sustained support network that Regis enjoyed, without teammates like Weil and Robertson protecting him, Hodgson faded into obscurity. For every Regis who was saved and elevated to stardom, there were others like Hodgson who slipped through the cracks. It made the brotherhood at West Brom even more precious. It made the 6 who stood by Regis even more important. The match itself was competitive, but played in good spirits. When the final whistle blew and the Blacks had won, there was no animosity, just teammates celebrating together, regardless of which side they had been on. That was the West Brom way. On the pitch, Cantello was the engine. In the iconic 5-3 victory over Manchester United, it was Cantello who scored one of the goals of the season. Regis, holding off defenders with his trademark strength, back-heeled the ball into Cantello's path. Cantello smashed it into the roof of the net. This moment perfectly captured their relationship. Regis provided the flair, Cantello provided the finish and the work rate. Derek Statham was the left back who completed the defensive unit. He was blessed with flair and flamboyance, unlike the no-nonsense style of Weil. Statham played a game that mirrored the technical skill of Cunningham and Regis. He would overlap on the left, supporting Cunningham. By securing the left flank, he allowed Cunningham the freedom to drift and attack without worrying about defensive duties. In the 1978-79 season, Statham was virtually ever present alongside Weil, Robertson and Batson. He was the 4th pillar of the defence. His inclusion in later statue celebration reunions confirmed his status as an integral member of the inner circle that protected the legacy of the 3 Degrees. While not one of the core 6, Tony Brown deserves recognition. Known as Bomber, he was a club legend and record goalscorer. Brown was the senior professional who bridged the generations. In the 5-3 win at Old Trafford, amidst a torrent of abuse, it was Tony Brown who scored 2 goals, including the equaliser that steadied the team after they fell behind. Brown's seniority commanded respect across the league. His embrace of Regis and Cunningham signalled to the rest of the footballing world that these players were under the protection of West Brom's greatest ever servant. The match that proved everything took place on December 30th, 1978. West Bromwich Albion travelled to Old Trafford to face Manchester United. This game is widely regarded as one of the greatest ever played in English football. From the moment the 3 Degrees stepped onto the pitch, the abuse started. The crowd subjected them to audible boos and racist chants. The intention was clear: intimidate them, break their spirit, make them fail. But something remarkable happened instead. West Brom fell behind early. Most teams would have crumbled under that pressure, especially with 50,000 people screaming hatred at them. But Tony Brown scored the equaliser, assisted by Cunningham, who was already tormenting the United defence. Then came the Cantello goal. Regis held off defenders with raw power and backheeled the ball perfectly into Cantello's path. The midfielder smashed it home. It was a goal that summed up the entire brotherhood. Regis doing the hard work, his white teammate finishing it off. Cunningham was unplayable that day. He delivered what observers called art in human form. Every time he touched the ball, something magical happened. Every racist boo made him play better. Regis scored the 5th goal, a strike that sealed the victory and silenced the Stretford end. By the final whistle, something extraordinary had occurred. The Manchester United fans, who had begun the game hurling abuse, ended it by applauding the 3 Degrees off the pitch. The scenes at the end of that match were unlike anything English football had witnessed before. Regis walked off with his head held high, surrounded by his teammates. Cunningham received a standing ovation from sections of the crowd that had spent 90 minutes trying to break him. Even the hardened Manchester United supporters, known for their fierce loyalty and hostility to visitors, couldn't deny what they had just seen. The press coverage the next day was equally remarkable. Newspapers that normally ignored racism in football suddenly had to confront it. They had to write about how 3 black players and their white teammates had delivered a masterclass. They had to acknowledge that West Brom hadn't just won a football match, they had won something far more important. In the dressing room after the game, there was no grand speech about changing society. The players simply celebrated together, as they always did. Weil and Robertson congratulated Regis and Cunningham. Cantello talked about his goal. Tony Brown, the veteran, smiled at what the young team had achieved. For them, this was just another win. But they knew it meant something more. The victory sent shockwaves through English football. Other clubs started to notice. If West Brom could field 3 black players and win at Old Trafford, maybe racism wasn't just morally wrong. Maybe it was tactically stupid. Maybe protecting your black players and building team unity was actually a winning strategy. This wasn't just a football match. The 6 players had forced a racist mob to acknowledge excellence. They hadn't just won, they'd changed minds. Brendan Batson later called it a seminal game because of how well we played. That victory proved the West Bromwich Albion philosophy. You don't defeat racism by walking off the pitch or asking nicely. You defeat it by being so good that even your enemies have to respect you, and you can only do that when you have teammates who have your back. This wasn't just the story of one man's strength. It was the story of a unit that refused to see colour. They created a temporary utopia, 90 minutes at a time, where talent mattered more than skin. In 2014, a statue called The Celebration was unveiled in West Bromwich. It showed Regis, Cunningham and Batson together, but at the unveiling stood Weil, Robertson, Statham and Brown, the white allies who made it all possible. The lessons learned in the West Brom dressing room became the foundation of Kick It Out. The idea that racism fights require white allies became a cornerstone of the campaign. The protection that Weil and Robertson had provided informally was institutionalised. When Regis died in 2018, the outpouring of grief from the football world was massive, but perhaps the truest tribute came from the teammates who stood with him during those dark years. They saved him so that he could change the world. Regis became more than a footballer. He became an agent and mentor, guiding the next generation. Players like Jason Roberts, his nephew, and Lloyd Kelly learned from him. He taught them the survival mechanisms he had developed, resilience, dignity, and the crucial importance of finding allies who would stand beside you when things got tough. The impact stretched far beyond football. Young black children across England saw Regis on television and dared to dream. They saw that excellence could overcome hatred. They saw that with the right people around you, anything was possible. Regis gave them hope during one of the darkest periods in British race relations. For 90 minutes every Saturday, within the 4 lines of the pitch, they created a place where a black man could be a king, protected by a guard of honour that saw no colour, only the stripes on their shirts. That's how 6 men saved Cyrille Regis. Not by being heroes, but by being teammates.